Three, two, one. Here we go. We are live. Well, hello everybody. Hello and welcome to 17th, I think, right? Episode.
I think so.
Don't you help
I
me?
could be wrong. Yeah, it could be 17 or 18. I don't know. And I think you're sharing
Yeah,
our two
so-
scoops there.
Oh, excuse me. Let me get rid of that. But yeah, so probably the 17th, somewhere around there, episode of Film the Handbasket. So we did skip last week. We had skipped last week because we had some personal issues that happened, first of all, and then secondly, there was when we did get together in the short time that we had, we ended up having technical issues. There were technical malfunctions. We were not able to get our stream going. I blamed StreamYard. I mean, I don't know. It's most likely just us two knuckleheads trying to get shit working unsuccessfully. But you know,
well,
since we don't know, I'm allowed to blame.
Working now.
Hopefully, right? Everything seems to be going. But yes, so okay, my cat is. What? He's not going to give me peace. Pop up. Okay. So what are we talking about today? So today, I mean, it's constantly, it seems like every time that we have, every other time we have an episode, actually every time, because last time we had an episode, same thing happened. Every time it seems like we have an episode and we plan to talk about something else comes up all the time. This happens. And last time we did not go, fall for the bait. But this time around, we're going to try to both sides it, talk about what we had in mind before, and also what about the big news of the day, right? What is going on? The big news. And that is, of course, the tariffs.
Sure.
So I don't know. Let's get into that first, maybe. You want to get into that first?
Yeah, sure. Where do we even start with Tariff Boy? I don't know where, but
Tariff Boy.
Yeah, as most people are aware, watching this, Donald Trump and the Trump administration have been on this tariff rampage basically since they got into office a couple months back.
Did he say he's one of his favorite words, something like this?
Yes, he said it's the most beautiful word in the English language. I think were his exact words. So the basic gist of Trump's argument is that the entire world is unfair to the United States because many countries in the rest of the world, the United States has trade deficits with. And he defines a trade deficit as being that country taking advantage of the United States. So it's really strange logic, but it is what it is.
Yeah. So, well, yeah, that's the interesting thing, because technically, that's one of the things that I was reading about is, I guess maybe that's an interesting way of putting it. But yeah, it's not necessarily the raw figures. It's not necessarily the raw numbers that he's going by to say this is our trade imbalance. He's got some other stuff. He's like, oh yeah, we're taking into account, currency manipulation and, other stuff. Who the heck knows? So it's got a little bit of leeway open for the little, classic, oh, we got to do this because we said so.
Well, I don't think anybody, including his own administration, by the way, really understand how they came up with those numbers. Like for people who aren't aware, several days back, Trump came out, I think it was on Sunday, was it? A couple days ago, whatever it was, came out and he presented this big chart for the media at a press conference with, country and what their tariff rate is going to be. So, as an example, China was slapped initially with a 30% tariff on top of the 20 that it had previously been assessed. So that brought it up to 34, not 36. So that brought it up to 154%. But when you look at the math of how these tariffs were calculated, it looks really simplistic and doesn't make a whole lot of sense mathematically. So a lot of countries are like, how the hell did you get this? So basically,
Well,
the
he
entire
sort of
globe.
says it.
Well, what he sort of
Well,
says that it doesn't make sense.
well, no. It sort of says there, like, oh, I'm adding all a bunch of other stuff into there. There's like a
Right,
black
but
box of magical formula mix that
yeah, there's no math behind it, right? There's no logic. It's just them making
this
stuff
Trump
up as they
math,
go along.
maybe, it's a little bit of a.
Yeah. So be that as it may, the entire world were hit with tariffs. Regardless, doesn't matter if you're a big country, a small country, doesn't matter if you're an inhabited country or an uninhabited island. He hit everybody with a bare minimum of 10%. So that obviously rocked the markets big time. Last week, we saw, 1,000-point plus drops, I think, both Thursday and Friday.
So this is what, just real quickly, just so I know that I'm on the right page, right? This is what he means by the reciprocal tariffs. Then the reciprocal quote unquote tariffs are this. Okay.
Yeah. So remember, he came out and said on August 2nd, was it? Yeah, August 2nd, we're going to announce reciprocal tariffs on basically the entire world. So that's what they did. So
August 2nd?
April 2nd, sorry. Yeah, sorry. This has been a crazy month for me, but yeah, April 2nd, not August. So what came of that was basically the world reacting to it. And the markets have been tanking. And then over the weekend, there was a lot of flurry of activity because I think there was a lot of pressure on the Trump administration by industry in the US saying, you got to walk away from these tariffs. You got to back, because it's just going to cripple the economy and destroy like a lot of businesses, not to mention the people there. And so then today, back up a little bit. So then countries around the world, China most notably, announced counter tariffs against those. So China came out and they announced their own 54% tariff, of which Trump then doubled down and added another 50% to it. So bringing the tariffs up to 104% as of this morning. Then China earlier today slapped another 30% on, bringing theirs up to 84%, if my math is correct. So as it stands right now, the U.S. has got 104% tariff on China. China's got an 84% tariff on the U.S. Other countries have countermeasured as well,
Didn't
but
that
to
go
a lesser
up?
extent.
Didn't that go up? I heard 125 and then even higher than that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'll get to that. Yeah, no, that literally just happened maybe an hour ago. So, yeah, sorry. Thanks for reminding me. So China reciprocated with the 86. And then most recently, as of about an hour or so ago, Trump responded with 125%. So the markets have been literally all over the map today. They started up over 2,000 points, which is something I've never seen before in my life. And then they dropped down to red territory. And they didn't drop down to red territory, but they dropped down significantly. And then it looks like they've since rebounded. So the Dow closed up 2,900 points, which I think is the largest I've ever seen it in my lifetime. So long story short,
is that just a temporary, just a fluctuation?
The reason why it rebounded. So what happened was Trump came out and announced the 125% for China. And then shortly after that, he announced that the other reciprocal tariffs he was putting on pause for 90 days.
Yeah, that's what I was reading too. Yeah. So that's why, because they decided we have a short window to sell and buy. Now's not the time. Maybe we got 90 days to do this. See, this is what I mean by, like you mentioned, like a lot of this seems not very well thought out, like pretty half baked, And I think that's part of the plan, because Trump gave away part of the game plan, a little bit of the of the game when he said, "Oh yeah, world leaders have been calling me, and let me tell you, they've been kissing my ass."
Right.
So I think that's part of it, where he's just being like, "Do you think this is ridiculous? We're gonna have to come to an agreement here." So who was it that proposed? So somebody proposed, how about we don't do tariffs on each other's products, and then the EU tried to do the same thing, and Donald Trump was like, "No, it's not. That's not sufficient. You guys have to."
Well, yeah.
So I think that there's a negotiation going on, is what I mean. This is some kind of renegotiation of the, maybe not Bretton Woods renegotiation per se, but maybe a little bit, restructuring.
Well, this is classic negotiation 101. And I've said this about Trump before, right? If you go into any sort of intro MBA negotiation course, this is what you're taught. And I know this because I was taught it. And I remember one of the first courses I did when I did my MBA was negotiation. And the guy came in, and it was one of the best courses I actually did in my entire career, because he actually taught us really good practical skills on how to negotiate. Like, he came on in, the first thing out of his mouth was, "This is going to be the best course you guys have ever done in your lives, because I'm going to teach you guys how to save money on negotiating for buying a car." And he did, right? He literally did. Like, I've saved tons of money over my life ever since, because he taught us really good practical skills. And one of those skills is to go big and go loud, right? And that's Trump's MO. He goes in all sorts of bluster, speaking loudly, "Oh, this is absurd. We're getting ripped off." That's classic negotiation 101 tactics. And the idea is, if you make it uncomfortable for people, they'll want to negotiate a deal. And by uncomfortable, I mean, like, this person is showing their anger, they're showing their bluster, they're showing, like, whatever we want to call it. We just need to keep them silenced. So I'll give you an example. So you think about, a lineup somewhere in a customer service line. Once somebody starts yelling and screaming and whatever, and making noise, they get taken care of. If you go up to a customer service and you say, "Oh, I'd like to return this," all meekly, you might not get anywhere. You go in and say, "This fucking thing is broken," and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, they just want to get you out of their face.
Yeah.
So
It doesn't work with everything, but it works with a lot of things. You can get away with a temper tantrum. You can even see it happens with toddlers. Parents do it. But that makes a difference.
The problem, though, is in this situation,
like, what is it, Mad Dog, where you pretend that you're a mad bull or something, where people don't even know what to expect, and they're like, "Listen, to calm you down, like, let's just settle something."
But in this situation, like with China, China's not going to play that game, because they don't need to play that game. They, to use Trumpian language, they've got the cards. So I think people in the U.S. should get prepared themselves. Prepare yourself for things being a lot more expensive. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was listening to some people saying, like, $150 pair of sneakers would cost over $300. iPhone would cost $3,500. You know what I was thinking? Like, maybe this is just because ironically, maybe it's because I'm a little bit old, or maybe it's not even that I'm old, or it's just that maybe an artifact of the generation where I grew up or something, right? Where I'm like, it does not sound like an unreasonable price for a high-end computer to me. Like, that's a huge, you get a pocket, high-end, what is a supercomputer? The performance of those, of your iPhone, I'm leaving aside the fact that this is a magnificent camera. Every single iPhone, this is a badass camera. You know what? Back in the day, you would pay $1,000 just for a camera like that. You could spend more money for a camera like that, and look at all those features that you get. And guess what? You can even it's also a freaking pocket supercomputer. Well, so when you think that, people, okay, if you told me, like, okay, the iPhone goes from being $1,500 to $10,000, I would have been like, whoa. But like, you know what? If instead of upgrading your iPhone every freaking year, you upgrade your iPhone every 3 years, who the hell cares? And are you telling me that's all that it costs to buy a made in America iPhone? I mean, it's not going to be overnight, obviously, but in a way, you can kind of see where Trump is coming from. And he's even said stuff like, "It's going to be rough for a little bit, blah blah." Why? Because there's no way that this is going to be a painless transition, but something does have to happen. And I don't know if you watched Wyatt's video on this regarding the China thing, but why I was saying that China can't back down. Like Trump is trying to get him to back down. China can't back down. They're in a position where they have to stand up to Trump, and otherwise they will be screwed. It's going to come at the recovery of U.S. will come at their expense, right? And that actually raises the risk significantly of World War III, in the Pacific. It's like that second phase of the Cold War that's still mostly cold that we were talking about before in a previous episode. It's going to go warm and then hot.
Well, unlike you, I am old enough to remember the pre-globalization days. And what I can tell you is you're absolutely right. Like, the last 30 years or so here in the West, we've developed and we've turned into sort of a throwaway economy because everything has become relatively so cheap, right? But no, I definitely, like my parents, for God's sakes, our Kenmore clothes washer, I think my mother still has it. And the same one that she bought back in the 70s. You know why? They were built to last, and you also took care of them, and you also serviced them regularly, and whatever it may be if you needed to. But nowadays things have become so cheap. You don't service anything, you don't maintain anything. If a clothes washer breaks, go buy a new one because they're only $500 or whatever they cost, right?
Well,
like it's not worth the cost to get a repairman in to even repair it in a lot of cases.
Well, I think especially I think right now, with maybe ever since, I don't remember what year, maybe the 2000s, the Internet of Things was supposed to be a thing. Mm-hmm. Ever since the people were like, oh yeah, your washing machine and your toaster and your microwave all need to connect to your Wi-Fi network, and you need to be able to, first control that from somewhere, and eventually control that from an app in your phone and all this other stuff. Yeah, okay, so am I willing? So this is another just me being a grumpy curmudgeon, I guess. Just being old in a way where I'm like, I don't need those features. I don't care, dude. I don't need a smart TV. I have no need to do that. Like, what I have to speak to my television in order for it to find the thing on Netflix. I don't need to do that.
Well, I've got a smart dishwasher, and I tell you, man, I've never figured out a use case of why I'd ever need a smart washer. Like, I've never installed the app. I've never cared to, because it's like, why? Like, when am I ever going to need this to activate it remotely or something? It's silly. Yeah. I agree.
In my life, it's always an annoyance where it's like, oh, you buy a new stereo for your car. Oh, you have to download the freaking Kenmore app in order for it to, or the Kenwood, whatever it is, right? I'm just like, why do I have to do this? Why do I have to agree to your stupid terms of service where you're admitting that you're collecting my GPS data and all this other stuff just so I can turn the subwoofer on? Like, what is this crap? It's a good thing that there's workarounds and stuff, but imagine eventually that there aren't, and you just have to do all that. I'm not for the Internet of Things. I say screw that. I'm willing to type in my like I'm willing to use a keyboard to type stuff in. If it's on a TV, what, remote control with like little keyboard, or maybe like a little software, like little keyboard widget that pops up. That's enough for almost all these use case scenarios, like 99% of use case scenarios. Otherwise, you have wireless mice and keyboards and all kinds of stuff. We even buy a Roku stick, control that from your phone. There's a lot of different options in this race of appliances now where it's outdated, just like your car is. The computer in your car, well, it used to be sufficient to do this. Nowadays it runs your backup camera at 120 frames per second at 4K and in high HDR, all this other stuff. yeah, you know what? You don't need that. And if you're going to say, oh, well, you know what? Now the new model of Dodge, freaking Grand Caravan or whatever, the camera no longer runs at 4K 120 frames per second. Now we're back to a uh, 20 frames per second camera that's running at 720p in this next model. Sorry, that's just the way it is, right? Or whatever, or however you want to work around that. Or now you have to pay this much more for it. I think that these are all reasonable workarounds. The problem, I mean, I think the problem that we're seeing right now is that there's no way it's going to be painless. And with China pushing back, I don't know what Trump expected. Wait, he must have expected that they would push back because
I think, I think Trump believes that America is the center of the universe. I think that he expected everybody to capitulate and cower down, and
or still does.
Or still does. But he obviously still does, because you could see in his truth, whatever social truth, whatever the frig they're called, in his posts, you could tell that when he's referencing China, there's anger there, right? There's real anger there. Like he's like, I'm still waiting for them to call me. China's not calling you, dude.
So he must have he must have expected a different outcome.
Yeah, he did, because he's stupid, and he always has been stupid. Like, none of this is surprising to me.
Yeah,
like, the guy's an idiot.
It kind of reminds me. What was that thing?
What you elect.
In his first term, he had that. Oh shoot! What was it? Somebody from China. I can't remember. It's been too long. But basically, yeah, you get you when you're doing these kinds of bullheaded tactics, and you're not sufficiently well versed enough in what's going on, and you don't know what it is that you're doing. You even get loyal people like Elon Musk saying, "I can't believe," yelling at his advisor, whoever his advisor is. And I heard somebody say, I don't remember who, some analyst was saying that, probably what happened is they presented Trump with a range of options. They're like, here's what we can do in terms of the tariffs, right? And Trump just looked at it and just did the Trump thing. He's like, yeah, we're going balls to the wall, go big or go home. And now he's trying to take a little bit of a step back, and I don't know, or maybe not. Maybe he really maybe it will be. Maybe we'll have some. I mean, it's already had some results. I mean, the EU tried to cancel all tariffs on the U.S. They were going to make an even deal. That would have been progress already. That would have been massive, I think. Go ahead.
Well, the EU just slapped the U.S. with 25% tariffs.
Yeah.
So, and from what I recall, von der Leyen said that they'd be willing to agree 0% tariffs on certain items, not everything.
Okay.
So you got to listen. You got to read the devil's in the details, right? At this point, I haven't seen any country actually make any sort of agreement with the U.S. So and what I'm saying is, don't believe everything that you read, because Trump is full of shit, and he's always full of shit.
I think it's all in flux. He hopes to be getting all these phone calls, and maybe that is what's happening. Maybe he is.
Well, absolutely. I think that's why he paused it for another 90 days, to give them more room to negotiate with countries, and that'll end up happening, right? I'm sure that they'll come to an agreement with Vietnam, right? I'm sure that they'll come to some sort of arrangement with India. At this point, Trump needs agreements just to say he got an agreement. Whether or not they're good agreements or not, whether or not they're good agreements or not doesn't matter at this point, right? And I'll use Vietnam as an example.
It's an interesting example.
Well, and I mentioned this on the OM the other day. If you look at Vietnam, they've got a massive trade deficit with the U.S., right? I think they ship something, and I'm just making up general numbers, but they're somewhat in the ballpark from what I recall. I think the trade from Vietnam to the U.S. was something like $130 billion or something in that territory, and the exports to Vietnam from the U.S. was only like 15 million. So right there, you would say, okay, well, Vietnam's got 130 billion, and they're only importing 15 billion. They'd be silly not to make some sort of agreement with the U.S. And here's why they'd be silly. when you look at that 15 billion that they're importing in, like a third of it is Apple components from the US,
So
right?
it's high end and
Well,
product.
it's just stuff that they assemble in Vietnam and then ship back to the US or somewhere else.
Oh, like that.
Yeah.
Really? That counts in the
Yeah.
freaking trade? Oh my god. This is
So-
this is ridiculous.
So
That is
from what I
absolutely wait. That is absolutely absurd. If that is taken into account, then I don't even know how much of these numbers are, how serious they are. Like, what are people buying these iPhones in Vietnam? What do you think an iPhone costs in Vietnam?
No,
What do you think these?
no, these are all getting exported out. Right?
Yeah.
So
They are.
that's
Those
just,
are.
yeah,
Go
that's
ahead.
one example. So like for ballpark, roughly a third are basically, as best I could tell, components from Apple or countries like that. Now, don't get me wrong, Vietnam will absolutely feel some pain. So thinking, sneakers, for example. So they make a lot of textiles for Nike, as an example. Nike has a big plant there.
Okay.
So absolutely, like if you look at a company like Nike or sneakers or clothing, stuff like that Vietnam produces, they'll absolutely take a hit there. But I'm looking at the math and I'm thinking, well, that's $10 billion ballpark that we're talking about here versus the 130. Yeah, I'd be shocked if Vietnam didn't make some sort of deal. It doesn't mean that they're going to import more from the US. And that's another fallacy that Trump always has. He thinks that the only thing preventing the US from exporting their goods are tariffs on those goods. The reality is nobody wants US products abroad because they're too expensive. And that's the end. Like unless.
Well, I think tariffs make them more expensive, but I think just besides that,
even without the tariffs, it wouldn't matter, right? Like the tariffs.
Even
no
Americans oftentimes don't buy American. Like,
right?
You get the little "Made in America" thing, and people. I mean, there's some people that care. I care a lot, right? I'll buy stuff that's made in America. I know it's kind of cheesy, but for me, it's not even about necessarily the price of the product or whatever. You know what? You can go to, I don't know, freaking Kmart. I don't know if Kmart's still around, but you can go to Kmart and find, I don't know, some pair of socks that you can go to Walmart and get for cheaper, that you can go to Amazon and buy for even cheaper, that you can go to AliExpress and maybe buy for even cheaper. If you're hunting for the best freaking deal out there, well, you know what? You'll probably be sitting around on Amazon and AliExpress, right? It's not necessarily like, I don't know. Like, let's say, if I'm going to buy something, I really prefer, let's say, for example, I'm going to buy a musical instrument. I'm going to prefer to actually purchase it from a place which sells musical instruments. And for a multitude of reasons, including I want that place to be here. Like, and on top of that, I'm going to try to buy a musical instrument that was made in America because I want there to be musical instruments that are made in America. And if I pay a little bit more, okay, you know what? You're made in Japan or you're made in China, little, I don't know what, beginner student entry level instrument, right? You are, even though it's a great deal and it's the best deal, you are severely underpaying for that. Just like we were talking about with computers, right? Just look at the performance of computers nowadays. How much more computation power do you need? For $400 nowadays, you can get something that is tremendously fast and overpowered for 99% of consumer uses.
Right, but using your guitar example, right? Or let's use the iPhone example, right?
Either.
I don't. Yeah, like if an iPhone costs $1,000 now, and according to the Bank of America, an iPhone will now cost $3,000. I don't know how they came up with that number, but let's assume that they've put some analysis into it.
Mm-hmm.
But the Bank of America said, yeah, an iPhone will cost around $3,000 in the US. So all things being equal, would you pay $3,000 for that phone? Of course you wouldn't. right?
Whoa. It depends. Like, okay, so it depends on who you ask. I think that there's going to be people that are consumer loyal and they don't care. It doesn't matter to them if it's $10,000, if it's $1,000, they don't care, right? So there's going to be people like that, and there for most other people, I think what would happen is you would just buy the phone. You wouldn't replace your phone every year. That would be it.
Yeah, or you'd buy a cheaper phone, or you
Buy
just
a less expensive phone.
Yeah, you get priced out of the iPhone market, right? And that's what'll happen, right?
iPhone makes more budget models, and they used to make more budget models. So you know what? They can do that again, and it's
I'm
just
not sure they can though, because the reason why your iPhone is going to cost $3,000 is because of the supply chain, because of the labor costs.
yeah.
Right.
Well, labor costs. This is after the supply chain. This is after the supply chain gets worked out. This is assuming years down the road, you actually have the supply chain where you are making the shell of the iPhone in the US and you are making the chip in the display. That assuming that happens, which let's say, I don't know, I'm going to just say it's take 5 years to a decade.
Okay. And not just the supply chain. You also need to assume that everybody in the United States, their standard of living is going to drop substantially, and you're all going to be poorer. That's the only way this model will work. That's the only way you'll ever get that iPhone down to $1,000 again.
Well, that's the thing. You can't get the iPhone at $1,000 because think about it. It's not just that. What else is the American consumer on the hook for?
But
our healthcare industry. Hold up.
Chinese people will be able to get the iPhone for $1,000.
Our healthcare industry assumes and requires that the consumer pays in a huge chunk of it. Without that, like, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to need to make America healthy again because you're going to be people are going to be dropping like flies. Like, it's going to be a huge disaster.
Yeah, but I guess my point is, you said that you won't be able to get an iPhone for $1,000, but everywhere outside of the US will be, right? Because they'll be able to just buy it from China. That's the thing. Like, basically all these tariffs are going to do is make a whole lot more in the US more expensive. And if you want to develop those industries, right, that's fine. But
everywhere else, Huawei is going to be so much better value that it's going to make very little sense for you to be
right.
I see what you're saying.
You know, and competition being, and I think I said this in the OM, by creating this quote fortress North America. Okay, great. You've now insulated a bunch of buggy whip factories.
Buggy whip.
Just everything will be outdated is my point, right? Like, we're protecting the big three automakers. Okay, wow, great. They'll be bankrupt in 10 years. So all you're going to do is prolong the life of a dying man, right? In this case, dying companies. So yeah, you might string a few extra years out of Chrysler, Ford, and GM, but make no mistake, they're not long for this world.
No.
They don't have the pipeline. They don't have the R&D.
You can maybe get rid of, what can maybe eventually happen is the government might own part of some or a substantial amount of those companies. You can't not have them because it's military industrial complex stuff. You have to, otherwise, you can't make Humvees and stuff. Can't repair them.
Yeah,
nobody's making parts, so you can't not have.
Well, you could just not have Humvees, right? Okay, if it's just the Humvees that GM is making, right?
No, it's much more than that. That's what I mean. Like all of this stuff. Like, how is this continuously developed and continuously researched? It's continuously developed and continuously researched partly in the civilian market. You have the reason why Ford can make a decent diesel is because they made decent diesels for a long time. And when you need to put a Ford diesel engine, you need to make a Ford diesel engine, then you need to put the Ford diesel engine into a military vehicle for a military, what's it called, right? You have the ability to do that. You can't not have that. So those automakers, it's kind of like for the same reason why you can't not have any domestic chip production. It just won't happen. Even Russia, right, has has to have some domestic chip production. Otherwise, your jets won't fly. Otherwise, how are you going to build trains, whatever? It's not just washing machines.
Right.
There's
and I guess my point is, like, if what you're saying is true, and I don't know if it is or not, I haven't really thought about it, but let's say, for example, the United States says it's in our national interest to have an auto company. Right?
They're too big to fail. They're going to say they're too big to fail.
And if that's the case, hey, I'll buy that. If a country says we need to have an independent automaker making vehicles for our citizens in this country, okay, cool. But you need to be aware that that car is going to be so expensive that the only people who will be buying it will be the government, to your point, right? Like, because
how much more expensive will the truck be then? How much more expensive will the Ford F-150 be?
Well, thousands of dollars more, tens of thousands of dollars more. You need to understand, like,
would you say 50% more? Would you say 30% more? Because it feels like that's a product. Not 50,
but
okay.
Like, most of the North American market right now is largely, it's either made in the US proper, so forget about them, like that's irrelevant because they're not going to move, or in Mexico or China. I'm talking about the big three, right? So, or Mexico or Canada, not China. So
Mexico, Canada. We do have stuff in China though.
Yeah, but not much. But I think
not much, really. Okay,
not on the big three, right? Like the big three.
Well, I thought I heard like Buick was being made there a lot, and
they have manufacturing over in China, but that's to support the Chinese market, right, for their cars, which isn't that much.
Okay,
like I don't think America will export a whole lot of vehicles from China. I could be wrong, but I doubt it. I think most of it gets exported from Canada and Mexico. But okay, let's use Mexico and Canada as an example. The labor costs alone would be so much less in Mexico and Canada compared to the US, right? So yeah, 30% more is not unreasonable whatsoever, right? Not unreasonable whatsoever.
The labor costs are going to be less in Canada?
Oh yeah, big time. Right, keep in mind the exchange rate right now is what, 69 cents or whatever. Mexico, you got to factor all that in. Like, there's a reason why manufacturing makes a go of it in Canada vis-a-vis the US because of the exchange rate, right? Like,
so actually, wow, I'm surprised. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and then Mexico is even worse. Like,
Mexico.
Canada's been losing our manufacturing to Mexico for years.
I don't know if it's true, but Americans generally assume that Canadians have on average better like the lifestyle, better standard of living than
I think we do.
Americans. So
you can't put money into it, right? Because what I mean is the value of my dollar will go much further in Canada than it will in the US. Right. So I do think we've got a much better standard of living here, just having traveled in the US pretty extensively and seen what I've seen. But no, in terms of manufacturing, you always got to have in the back of your mind, you need to factor in that the Canadian dollar will be in good times 25% less. Right.
Yeah.
Then Mexico, like I said, Mexico is another planet. So yeah, I can.
But if it's all cost of labor, I'm thinking that Donald Trump will be happy to make it's not just all cost of labor. First of all, the bigger deal is right now is the supply chain thing. This is the reason why it can't just happen just the way that it's being laid out. You can't, if you had to, overnight, you could not make iPhones in the United States. You'd have to, it would not be doable, right? So first of all, you physically can't do it, right? Second of all, the results of doing this, right? Let's say over the long term, right? the results of bringing all this stuff, let's say, for example, into the United States and having the production for it in the United States. In the United States isn't not a big enough market to basically supply all of that. Like, what are we gonna do? Like, are we gonna sell it to? I mean, I guess if in a way, if in the new multipolar world we manage to really wrangle in and buckle down Europe and Latin America, you know, they're addicted to our Facebook. But I mean, you can't expect them to pay $3,500 for an iPhone. That's the thing.
They won't, right? And that's the problem. And same thing with the cars, right? On top of the fact that these are ICE cars that nobody wants, right? They're also expensive ICE cars that nobody wants. So how do you compete against a cheap, very good quality Chinese EV in this day and age? I don't know. And that's why I'm saying, like, you know,
America can do it. America, we can say, hey, gas guzzlers for life, drill baby drill. We're adding carbon to the atmosphere to save the trees,
but you're talking foolishness, right? Be serious. The problem is,
you can sell it
to who though? Americans? That's it. Nobody else is buying American ICE cars. Nobody is going to buy an ICE car in this day and age.
Yeah, but what I mean, Americans would be continuing to buy the combustion vehicles for now. So that's what I mean.
Sure.
Like, for now, we're putting that on hold. Yeah, Donald Trump says Tesla's a great car, but you know what? We love American manufacturing. And before we move all of our manufacturing of Tesla into the U.S. and, you know, even though they're still going to have the H1N1 visa workers, we first need to make sure that we buckle down our domestic big three automakers. And of that, like I was saying, like, the huge parts of that, first of all, huge parts of that is already just in the U.S. And that's stuff that we can make stuff here already, just on the ground, from the ground up, including all the electronics and everything. It has to be.
No.
You think if we had to make a Stryker infantry fighting vehicle, for example?
Well, we're talking cars, right? So even the big three automakers, the majority of those the majority of the components.
You mean like that? No, I don't mean like that. I mean, like, could you create a Jeep, right, from 1950s era Jeep? Do we have the infrastructure to do that? You don't think even that? You think we're that far gone? Okay.
Yes, I do. You got to understand, the majority of auto parts are made in China. Like here in North America, we have assembly plants. We don't have manufacturing plants. We have
they assemble them in freaking Mexico and then ship them here.
But all the parts are coming from China. So and that's my point. You can insulate a market as much as you want for a product that nobody wants. That's fine. But that product that nobody wants, that's only going to be sold in one market, is still going to be exponentially higher than what people are used to. And that's why nobody's buying them now. Like, man, there are lots. Drive by any lot and you will find, number one, they're all full. And number two, a lot of them will still have inventory from 2023. Yeah. And the 2026 stuff is coming out in a few months. So what does that tell you, right? No one's buying them. Nobody's buying them before this tariff nightmare. They're certainly not going to buy them now. So, to answer your question long-windedly, can America build a Jeep? No, not domestically. No, they'd still have to import all sorts of stuff, and it'll take years to build out supply chains like that. And
this is one I think
trillions of dollars.
I think we can do. This is one I think it's within our grasp to be able to, I don't know if Chevy Blazers are still being manufactured, but to manufacture Chevy, I think we can. Maybe the amount of catch up that we have to do in order to achieve that. Maybe there is something that maybe it's like, hey, you know what? The things that we use to make heavy axles and marry them to the transmission or some other shit, we need to buy a new one of those, and we have to buy it from, I don't know, freaking Greece, whatever. Maybe there's something like that, and you can get around. But I think for the most part, the vehicle, the automobile, that's one thing that we can mostly I think we can somehow finagle over. I think also aircraft, right? Even though we're going to be constantly importing a lot of this like avionics and stuff from other people. This is stuff that I think we can do here. I mean, I don't know. I don't trust Boeing nowadays. Maybe we can't. Maybe I shouldn't say that.
Well, yes, I think that could be reshored for sure. But again, it would take a long, long time because, again, I'll use the F-35 as an example. The F-35 has all sorts of foreign components, and there's all sorts of stuff that is manufactured outside the U.S. in Canada, for example.
Mhm.
So, could you tariff Canada enough so that gets reshored to the U.S.? Maybe, but again, that would take, you're looking at 3 to 5 years, best case scenario, just to build a factory, and then you got to train people, you got to do all that stuff. And I kind of look at it and I say, will Americans actually want to do this type of stuff? Probably not. Right. I don't see Americans, rushing en masse to go work in factories again, after 30 odd years.
I don't know. Like, I think that there's definitely a desire for things to change, but I don't know if we're that same culture that values that same work ethic that we had before. I mean, you never know. I guess that's a tough one. Like if you were to give the people an opportunity to pull off the the New Deal infrastructure, whatever stuff again, right? Like, would we be able to do that? Would people show up and work? Or have we completely lost our minds to the point where people are just gonna be like, work? No, dude, I want to like sit on Instagram and make money that way, So.
Well, it would require a massive kind of cultural shift in our mindset. And obviously, it would require a massive change in how we educate our children. Because
I've heard that we've tried to do that. Go ahead.
Well, we've lost so much over the last 40 years with like the kids coming up these days, and I can speak from experience, like they don't know shit. And the schools they're not designed to teach vocations anymore, right? When I was a kid, I still remember having things like woodworking, and you could learn, you had certain
home ec,
things like that were taught. That was all taken out of schools years ago. And what they replaced it with, I haven't a foggiest idea. But I don't think they're, my kids are necessarily learning more or learning better than I did. And I don't think that they're more equipped for this world than I was. So, and I think if you were to talk to a lot of parents, they'd say the same things. The schools are geared towards this globalized, everybody's diverse in values, and that's what we need to focus on. Is if you get an education in diversity or values or one of these nonsensical vocations, you'll be okay, because you'll be able to go get a job in the corporate world spewing that nonsense. That's all gone now, right?
The more I think back to my education here in the US, the more what it feels like. Think about reading, I don't know, CNN, right? Let me just like pull up something. Wait, MSNBC, right? Let's see. Trump says he's pausing most reciprocal tariffs for 90 days. Earlier this week, the U.S. stock market briefly rallied in response to speculation that Donald Trump was considering a 90-day pause to his policy on trade tariffs. The White House quickly knocked down their chatter and called it fake news, and the major indexes started dropping again. A few days later, the president published an item on his social media platform that announced a 90-day pause, but not for everyone. The reversal came just one day after White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, I don't know how to pronounce her freaking name, told reporters President Trump has a spine of steel and he will not break. She also added that the president was not considering an extension or delay to his policy on tariffs. So it's like they want you to be the person that reads that, right? And just literally accepts what it is that is being laid out and not questioning any part of that. Just read that and say, like, some experts said this, and for you to just I'm sorry, cat. My cat is such a scaredy cat. So don't worry about that, right? Worry about literally. Here's the narrative. Here's the new narrative. Here's what we're talking about, right? The kinds of people that end up sitting on Twitter with their Ukraine in their bio and being NAFO talking crap, and it turns out that they're like Gen Xers or even older boomers, you know, that have nothing better to do in their life. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that like you said at the beginning, I think Trump tried this as a negotiating tactic, and it's failing miserably for him. And that's why every day you're seeing him pivot and change his mind and this and that. That's just symptomatic of somebody who hasn't thought anything out.
He needs a way to back down now.
Well, and the thing about it is, I don't think anybody will. Like the countries who are going to make deals will be the ones who have no interest in importing anything from the U.S. anyway, and they know that. And I'll use the Vietnam one as an example.
Okay.
Like it's not like, oh my God, Vietnam reduced the tariffs. We're going to sell all sorts of, Ford Fiestas here now. No, that's not going to happen. Right? Like there's a reason why they don't want the cars. There's a reason why they don't want it's all too expensive. And none of that's going to change even with tariff drops. Because keep in mind, like it's not like Vietnam has a 48% tariff on the US right now. They don't. Right? This was just a made up Trump number. So
but any win that he can get, any win that he can basically backpedal now. Backpedal is honestly the way I'm looking at it. It's a good thing that he left enough leeway for himself to be like, I'm just doing negotiation tactics, because he's going to probably need to do some of that. And he probably is doing some of that. And that's probably why we're seeing all this stuff with the pause and all this other stuff. It's because the people scrambling in the background, people are scrambling. They're saying this is not going to work, and maybe this is already a point in time where the math is starting to, play itself out. The rubber's starting to hit the road somewhere. People are like, whoa. Now if I'm going to be importing this chemical from that company that I need to, in order to make this crucial thing for, a seal for some kind of infrastructure, something that's critical, right? Or some kind of component, all of a sudden, it can just have knock-on effects,
Sure. Well,
so there's people that are figuring this out right now, and they're saying, well, that's going to have to be an exception. That's going to have to be an exception. And those exceptions, they're going to be necessary.
Yeah.
So I don't see this being played out the way that it's currently playing out. There's just no way.
Well,
it gets softened.
Well, I agree. Like they're going to try to play all this out, but the reality is, they're going to back down because they'll have to back down. Because people cannot afford 125% price increases at Walmart. End of story. And, the majority of people in the United States, or I should say a lot of people, they don't have a whole lot of disposable income, like the average American, if they've got $500 in their savings account, that's all they have.
Well, the status of the average American does not even have $400 in their bank account. Think about that.
Yeah, I believe it. So like if you're relying on places like the Walmarts of the world for groceries and toasters or whatever else you need to buy,
Amazon will be even worse. Think about it. Amazon will be even worse.
Yeah,
not just that. Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're dependent on that stuff, and now it's more than doubled in price, well, that's a massive hit to your standard of living. And
well, you know what's going to happen? People are going to start buying a lot more on eBay, and they're going to start buying a lot more on Craigslist. I've been shopping on Craigslist this whole time. Are you kidding me? I never
honestly,
buy all this.
I think more people. I think you're going to see riots and protests before it gets to that. I think Trump, and I said this back when he was first inaugurated, I think I said to you, he's going to be on a very short leash, right? A very short leash. And so far, in the first couple months, it doesn't look like he's being too successful, even with his base. So I think
he got away with the Israel thing, but that cost him some political capital.
Right. And reality is not a whole lot of Americans care about Israel, like, unfortunately.
Yeah,
But
but the,
what they
the
do
people
care
that care
about,
about politics probably do care about Israel.
yeah, but the majority of people don't care about politics. But what they do care about is 125% price increases at Walmart. And you're going to have a whole lot of people, if these tariffs stay in place, you're going to have a whole lot of people who are going to get really desperate really quickly. And when you've got desperate people, uh, organizing en masse, you
So
got problems.
gas will more or less stay the same, right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah, I
will be.
guess.
Yeah.
Well,
Um,
I think they put like a 10% tariff on Saudi Arabia, and
but
however much, like,
it's
that'll
not
all
going to
go up.
be. It's not going to be dramatic increase in gas because we are more or less self-sufficient on that. Energy, in general, I
Well,
think will be
I think it
mostly okay.
I think it really, well, there's more to the price of oil than just tariffs. There's also oil demand. So because of numbnuts coming out with all these tariffs, what has happened is the global price of oil has dropped because everybody now expects there to be a recession, right? Uh, Everybody knows that there's going to be a recession now. So the price of oil dropped under $60 a barrel. Is that has nothing to do with the tariffs as such. That's just the fact that demand will go down, right? But so Trump can claim, hey, look, the price of oil is down. Yeah, we're doing great. I have my doubts. It doesn't really have anything to do with the tariffs directly, but more so indirectly for the fact that this guy is destroying the economy.
So it seems like
So
he maybe thought that he was maybe ripping the band-aid off and averting something which is more or less starting to happen right now, like trying to
yeah,
maybe prevent it to inhabit on his terms, which is why Wyatt's analysis, like again, I say it's very interesting, where he says if China has to respond, and we know that China has to respond, well, maybe Trump doesn't know that China has to respond, but then this is definitely pushing towards something. If there's no backing down, an unstoppable force hitting an immovable object.
well, there will be backing down. You'll see that. You'll see
That's
that
exactly
coming
what.
in the next
This is
next
exactly what we both have predicted. Yes, so that's where we're at.
Yeah.
Before we move on to our two scoops, though, I'd say we have about half an hour or so to go. I'd say one thing that we can totally dovetail this with is, of course, what's going on in Ukraine right now, because I think that Donald Trump is trying to do, or was trying to do, or maybe still is trying to do some kind of multi-pronged offensive. Maybe he had so much success with his USAID and National Endowment for Democracy, Blitzkrieg, that he thinks that he can do this on a grander scale, where if I go out there and I just affect this much kind of crazy change, I will get some kind of results, and anything that gets shaken up, I can make use of that in some way. And so basically, what could he be trying to do, right? With all of this stuff, what could he be counting on? And I think part of what he was probably counting on is that he was hoping to have made progress in Ukraine by now. Oh, your camera went out, by the way. I think he was hoping to make progress in Ukraine by now. And I think that the lack of progress in Ukraine is something that you can see playing out every day, with the Ukrainians are being really shysty about this. They're hitting Russian oil infrastructure every day. At first it was just like, okay, well, there was a disagreement. The Russians were like, okay, I forgot what it was, the 18th or the 25th or something, or the 28th maybe, they started their ceasefire, and then the Ukrainians waited until the 5th or something of next month. I think it might have been the 28th of this month. So the Ukrainians waited until this month to quote unquote start their ceasefire. But of course, right away they started hitting Russian infrastructure, and it wouldn't be the Ukraine war, it wouldn't be Ukraine. Ukraine is just they're the poster shoulder for this. And the thing is that I think the world kind of got a whiff of it. I think that people kind of sort of understand it a little bit, unless you really don't want to. But like, they just basically started accusing the Russians of doing what they're doing, right? First of all, they're like, okay, the Russians are hitting themselves. Then they start saying, oh, the Russians are hitting our pipeline infrastructure. There's no photos, there's no videos, there's nothing. It'll just be like, not Gazprom, was it not the gas? No, freaking what is their what is the Ukrainian big, not Burisma, Ukraine's big oil state-owned oil company, right? They'll go out there and they'll say stuff like, "Oh yeah, there was a strike on our infrastructure today," you know, and watching and like this is being played up in like the maybe more European kind of media where see the Russians are the ones that are untrustworthy. So the whole ceasefire thing, I think this is Zelensky having his revenge on Trump in a way, being like, this is so not working, haha, right? And Trump is trying to make some kind of bring this to some kind of conclusion. There's no way that Zelensky can accept the deal that Trump has for him, right? There's no way. That's the mineral deal is unacceptable for Zelensky. He can't politically take that. Even elections are probably very tough for Zelensky. Probably under these conditions, under these circumstances, he can't accept that either. So where does that leave Zelensky? Well, he's going to try to double down on his European support and get any kind of support where he can get it, and he's going to try to thumb his nose at Donald Trump because he knows he's got a lot of allies here on the other side. It's like Trump is not necessarily all of the United States deep state, you know. So he's got, he can at least be an annoying little shit, you know, to Trump and try to get something out of it. Like he's basically playing it back. So it'd be interesting to see what Trump is going to do and it almost feels like a trap where the Americans get to wash their hands, you know, and say, you guys can take this, Europe, you can take this, you know. Maybe what really matters about whether or not that kind of arrangement gets done is what will be Russia's stance on Iran if we decide to go to war with Iran, which I'm starting to think now is going to be the next war. If not, China, Taiwan. And Wyatt was saying, again, to bring up Wyatt's video, is that COVID was a shakeup, a ghost in the machine that changed Trump's policy direction towards China. But what could be another ghost in the machine this time around? What could be another wild card that can happen? And it's like, hey, maybe invasion of Taiwan. Now think about how screwed America would be then if you can't even get your chips from Taiwan.
Yeah, no, I've always said this. There'll never be a conflict over Taiwan. Never. People thinking about this, just they don't understand geography. It won't happen. With respect to Ukraine, I think that it really comes down to this is a proxy war. America has admitted it's a proxy war, and now they're trying to back out of the proxy war and trying to save face, quite frankly. And Trump was hoping that Putin would let him save face. Trump was hoping that Putin would negotiate, frankly, and the Russians are having nothing of it.
Well, they really are a little bit, but their negotiations, it's honestly, but he's even said this, the Ukrainians are the bigger problem because the Russians are saying, yeah, we'll negotiate, we'll even make concessions, but for the Ukrainians,
they haven't said that.
Well, they've been
No, Russia said that they're willing to talk. Russia's saying they're always open to talks, and Russia is willing to make a deal as long as it's a deal that they're willing to make.
Okay, so I don't remember exactly Putin's statement, but we can see the fact that they're willing to make some concessions, at least from the fact that they did this ceasefire agreement, right, where they even shot down their own drones or whatever. So you could say that they're
not willing to. I don't know. I don't understand where you're getting this from. No, Russia has always said that they're willing to talk. But I've never heard them say that they were willing to make concessions. That's a pretty distinct word, right?
Let me try to find.
I've never heard them say that they were willing to make concessions, and I don't think they will. I think Russia has a plan. They've been pretty straightforward what their plan is, and they're going to follow through with their plan. So you talk about the grain deal as an example. That was a deal that Russia wanted 3 years ago. So yeah, they could agree to that. But if you notice, they didn't even agree to it because America said, yeah, we've got this grain deal worked out. And Russia said, well, hold on. No, we don't. We've got all these nuances that need to be figured out before a grain deal is achieved. So no, Russia hasn't agreed to anything. And I don't think they will. Why would they? Russia's got all the leverage right now, right? So you've got Russia, which is not beholden to the U.S.
So I can't remember the exact statement, but I remember that some parts of certain statements that were said, like for example, we will negotiate, but we have to take into account realities on the ground, right?
Yeah. So the way I would read that, yeah, we're willing to talk to you as long as you guys realize the realities on the ground, which is we are winning and we have militarily defeated you. That's what he means by that.
Okay, so right? Then we are on the same page because that's what I'm talking about too, right? Where what Putin is saying is that, well, we're willing to. Okay, maybe concessions is not the right word that I'm using. Maybe we're willing to make real negotiations and make real deals. We want to put stuff in paper. There's stuff that the West can offer the Russians, and I think there were already certain things that they have done. Like there's certain businesses have been allowed to start operating in Russia, if I'm not mistaken. There was also some.
No, not yet. There's talk, but
it's
nothing's
discussed.
happened.
Okay, it's discussion.
Absolutely nothing has been signed between Russia and the United States. Nothing.
Okay, so it's all speculative. Okay.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, like I'm not siding with you where you're saying that absolutely nothing has been gained. I think that the Russians did give Donald Trump certain things. It's just that what they're saying is there's no way that we're going to not achieve our goals of the special military operation. That's what they won't compromise on. They'll do that, So and that is what's not acceptable to Ukraine, right? Because that is exactly what they will not compromise on. Because what that means is it's like that little that nucleus of the new ultra elite powerful Ukrainians that have the country by the stranglehold, and they get their $500,000 apartments in Kiev, and they get to drive awesome cars and party and date cute girls and all this other stuff. All of these people, right? Not only are they going to lose that privilege, but they're going to that whole movement, that whole Batka nash Bandera, Ukraina mать, whole thing, right? That whole that version, that identity of Ukraine, that project of the rebuilding and rebirth of Ukraine as an anti-Russian, pro-Western, I don't even want to say independence.
Vassal.
Yeah, right. Pro EU, whatever it is, right? So join that part of the Ukrainian dream, I think, had a little bit of a range. There were people that were really extreme, and there were people that were like, yeah, it would be nice to be able to move to the EU and that would totally help my business or whatever. So there was a range there, and that conversation was hijacked by the people in the extreme right, who saw a Ukraine that was explicitly anti-Russian. These are the people that fought against the Russians during, against the Soviets during World War II, right? So these were the really hardcore, and we always needed them. We always used them. What was that, Operation Gladio, right? Since World War II, I believe it was Operation Gladio. Since World War II, we were we knew and we worked with these ultra nationalists like Bandera and stuff like this, right? We actually worked with him, our intelligence agencies. So this was a long-term project. And so from our side, it would require the giving up of this multi-decades long, ever since World War II. Think about how well established and how deep and how interwoven. That's probably the reason why people like Blinken and Newland, who have Ukrainian roots, were able to make such an impact. And, Madeleine Albright and all these people made such a huge left such a huge mark on American foreign policy. Possibly comes, a lot from that. But So they'd have to give up on that. But also think about this: the Ukrainians who are in that position of power, they have to give up on that, and they go from being heroes to being the jerks that's caused this freaking war, killed 1 million Ukrainians, lost half the country, destroyed the economy. They become that. So no matter what, they're going to throw every single Ukrainian under the bus before they allow that. And that's what they won't compromise on. Really,
Right,
really. Go ahead.
But you need to keep in mind, though, like what Ukraine thinks doesn't matter. What the EU
apparently
thinks,
though it does, because look, Trump is having a hard time pressuring him. Zelensky's got his.
No, I think you're missing this. It has nothing to do with Ukraine. It has nothing to, at this point, it has nothing to do with Ukraine, has nothing to do with the EU. It has everything to do with a couple things. Number one, I go back to, it's about saving face, right? America owns this war, right? Everybody knows that it's a proxy war. They're trying to back out of it and save face and make it look like they haven't lost. So they're trying to make it look like they're mediating the war that they started. Like, think about how silly that is. But that's the role that they've kind of publicized for themselves. Oh,
or my conspiracy theory. My conspiracy theory is that they're trying to pawn it off on Europe, like the.
Well, I'll get to that. I'll get to that. So first and foremost, they've lost, and they can't make it look like they've lost. So now they're trying to make it look like they're mediating, but reality is they're trying to negotiate to get the hell out of there. And they're trying to make it look like they've negotiated some sort of settlement. Russia's not playing ball. Eventually, Trump will get in line. And
no, they'll see. This is the thing. This is what I mean by Ukraine is the harder. Oh, sorry.
Let me finish. So eventually, Trump will get in line, and Russia will achieve their aims, because Russia will keep going until they achieve their aims. And the United States doesn't have that sort of runway. They don't care, quite frankly. So that's the first point. Second point is to your point about Europe. Now, while they're retreating and losing this war, America also needs to keep the facade of NATO going, because they need to make money off all those weapons. So at the same time where they're retreating and turning their back on NATO, because, the NATO folks think that they're all, turning their back on NATO, even though Ukraine's not a NATO member, but I digress. So at the same time, while they're trying to retreat from this god-awful mess that they've created for themselves, they're also trying to simultaneously make it look like NATO is still a thing. And hey, you still need to, buy all the weapons from us because we need to deter Russia. See what a complete shit show this is, with these two counter narratives going on at the same time. So that's what Trump is trying to do. He's trying to back out of this thing while keeping the spigot going for weapons buying. That's all you're seeing here.
But so this is what I mean, where you're saying it doesn't matter what the Ukrainians want, and I'm saying, well, it doesn't matter what most Ukrainians want. It doesn't matter what 90% of Ukrainians want. It does matter what that tiny little elite who have captured power with the help of the West and are now the guys that are
tomorrow.
Okay, well, they can be if they lose their grip on power, but until they do, they can continue to feed the Russian meat grinder, and they would rather do that.
But what I mean is America will turn this off when they choose to turn it off. So Zelensky, whatever Z's you want to throw out there, they could all be killed tomorrow. Like, make no mistake. America will kill them themselves, or they'll tell the Russians to do it. Like, at this point, with all of them, I think I'll go back to Trump is trying to back out of this gracefully, and he's hoping that he'll find a good dance partner in Russia. And Russia, they're not gonna bend. They're gonna achieve their aims. So Trump will back out of this.
This is where I'm disagreeing with you. This is literally what I'm disagreeing with you. It's not that the Russians won't bend. It's that the Ukrainians won't bend. What needs to happen? Hold up.
This is what you're missing. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Let me lay it out. It's if Trump could have pressured Zelensky to have signed that deal, instead of endured the whole shenanigans at the Oval Office, right? Zelensky was clearly the one that was instigating it, and clearly the one who was being a piece of shit, right? And if he could have had this and held it up as a win, he would have loved to do that. What got in his way? It was not the Russians, right? It's the Ukrainians that he can't control. What do the Ukrainians say? The Ukrainians say, hey, we're willing to do this if we get a security guarantee, which basically means we're going to get into NATO. You can't do that. Okay, well, then what if we did this in a different way? We get a security guarantee, which basically means that we have an Article 5 guarantee. No, we can't do that, right? So basically what's happening is those Ukrainians, that little group, right? It's aptly named Banderites because they're like bandits, right? So that have got the whole entire rest of Ukraine by the balls with the assistance of us. No, if we remove our assistance from them or whatever, it's not like it will have some kind of effect. But you know what? They're not just going to roll over like that. What they're going to do is they're going to try to get their stuff from Europe, from the EU, like they're doing. They're going to try to cause. Sure. They'll do terrorism, right? If they have, like, they're already resorting to terrorism anyway.
Sure,
and they'll resort to terrorism. The Ukrainians are the ones that won't make that deal. They've lost the war. Basically, it's the same problem as before. All along, what happened? The Ukrainians lost, the Americans, the West lost the negotiation war with the Russians in Ukraine during Yanukovych's reign over the trade deal. The Russians simply offered a better trade deal, right? So the Yanukovych was just like, okay, well, I'm just going to go with a better trade deal. So the Americans lost that, right? So they through this huge protest, had this huge coup, this huge street push. The Russians had their counter protest. What happened? They try to quash that with force, right? They try to use helicopter gunships, use the Odessa trade union building fires and all this crap, right? The Russians fought back. They won the war, the civil war. We got Minsk. The Ukrainians said, psych, screw you. We lied. They rearmed. They fought them again. They lost the civil war a second time, but again, the separatists won. They beat Ukraine again. Why did Ukraine say, there's no way we're going to make a deal with you? Like, we are too proud. We are a proud nation. We do not bow to you guys. Psych, we're doing it again, right? And so the Russians can't have, and these guys are willing to do that, right? They're willing to do that to the end, right? So what the Russians can't have is they can't have those people there. And it's the Ukrainians that won't compromise because those people won't be kicked out. Just like we say we need to kick out Vladimir Putin, we need to kick out the Banderites.
If they don't get kicked out, they'll all be killed. That's my point. Like, at the end of the day, I agree with you. Zelensky's going around trying to get money from any rock he can find it from. But the hard reality is there is no money left. There are no weapons left. And no more is coming.
Yeah, that's what it is. There's no weapons
left.
Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, at the end of the day, like I said, Trump is just trying to come up with some sort of face-saving arrangement with the Russians. The Russians, I think, if it achieves their aims, they'll come to some sort of agreement. If it doesn't, they'll keep pushing until it does. And as far as the Banderites go, yeah, they'll all be killed, every single one of them. It's just a matter of time. You can't tell me
they'll get the treatment where they go to Canada and live on Banderas.
No, I think the Russians will kill them all because you can't tell me they don't know where they're at.
There's even a Bandera County in the U.S.
Yeah,
they'll move to Bandera County.
I think that really this is just Trump trying to save face, and the Russians aren't going to negotiate something that they don't want to negotiate.
Yeah, that is what it is. Thank you. There we agree. The Russians aren't willing to negotiate from a position of weakness and give the Ukrainians what the Ukrainians have lost on the battlefield. The Ukrainians are saying we're not willing to negotiate unless we take back through negotiations what we have lost on the battlefield. So that's already point number one, right? But I think the bigger point, the deeper point, the real problem is the whole denazification thing, where the Russians are going to say we're going to have, and the way that it's going to be portrayed in the West is the Russians want to have their influence on Ukrainian politics. They want to be able to control Ukrainian politics from the inside, Ukraine is not a sovereign country. Woe is Ukraine. Just as if we're not doing that right now, openly, right? Where we have like U.S. officials in Ukrainian important government seats. So we're going to make a big deal out of that, and we're going to be like, that's not acceptable. But really, from Ukraine's perspective, those guys are they are, as far as they're concerned, they are Ukraine, right? And so for the Russians, that is going to be the thing. I think that the reason why Trump will never be able to make a deal, even when he does make a deal, a ceasefire deal, infrastructure, not hitting infrastructure should be a pretty good, okay deal. At least you got something, right? The Ukrainians don't want to play along with even that, because that's what it really threatens. The real end of the line is that imagine that you have a Medvedev type that is in power now, and the Ukrainians are now making trade deals with Russia again, and they're looking eastward, and they're brotherly nations, and eventually they want to sign the Belarus, Russia, Ukraine single government, unitary government pact, or whatever it is. That's what they're trying to avoid under any circumstances. That is their number one ideological motivating factor, driving, right? So, sorry, I just think that's well, anyway, I guess I've explained what I thought. But okay, let's do our two scoops.
So let me set this up first. So I saw this and I laughed. So this is some sort of EU representative. I don't know what her title is, but she's like a legit EU. I don't know if she's a member of European Parliament or one of these. Basically, she's a European trother at one of these organizations, and she's been tasked with she's a trother of the worst kind, and she's been tasked with terrifying the Europeans into preparing for annihilation. And let's take a look. Now think about this. Imagine yourself being a European watching this lady on this commercial or whatever it is.
Welcome to What's in My Bag Survival Edition. First up, my glasses. Super important if you want to see what is happening or not. Next, my document in a waterproof pouch. A must in a rainy Brussels. Let's talk about lighting. I have a flashlight. If you don't forget the matches and of course, the light.
Pause for a second. What's up with the background music? It's like we're in some sort of old-timey Wild West saloon or speakeasy something.
That's what it is. Yeah, no, that's the feeling they're trying to give you. They're trying to give you like this feeling of this is just casual, what should be expected. Like this is, if you didn't know, number one, if you're going to be I don't know, washing your dishes, make sure to put sufficient dishwashing liquid or detergent, or if you don't have that, soap, onto your sponge. Like that's the kind of music that you would have in the background for that. Like it's supposed to do that.
And just to stress again, this is not an actress. This is an actual representative of some type. This is the quality of what Europe has. So God help you all.
And water, of course, because water is life. And my special friend, a Swiss Army knife. 18 tools in only one knife. A must-have.
You're like 3 lighters.
And don't forget your medication. You might need it, because you never know. And don't forget something to eat. You might be hungry, very hungry. And of course, some cash. In the middle of a crisis, cash is king, and your credit card might just be a piece of plastic, a charger, and a power bank, because a dead phone is a dead end. Playing cards, bit of distraction, never hurt anyone. And don't forget the radio. The smaller one.
How big's that purse?
Everything you need to survive the first 72 hours of a crisis. Speaking about being prepared, the EU is preparing its strategy to be sure that every citizen is safe in case of crisis. Be prepared, be safe.
Yeah, like how you think it's a joke. I think, well, that's partly, maybe that's what it is. It's supposed to be sort of half a joke.
Well, no, I don't think so. It's subtle brainwashing. right? Remember the 9/11 with the traffic lights. Oh, today's an orange day. Today's a red terror day. Today's nice. We're only yellow today. Remember that thing, the traffic light
Yeah.
terror levels? That's similar type of thing. We always got to have something in the background keeping you scared, right? You always got to remember Russian boogeyman is just in the woods over there, and you might need 72 hours. So you better put a radio in your purse.
Well, it's a way of scaring you, right? Because like, what if the Russians
subtle
invade?
scared. No, it's subtle scared, right? It's very indirect and quite frankly, scummy, right? It's these subtle ways to, like you said, the background music is all happy and stuff, and she's laughing. She's, they've got outtakes
Somewhat
of her
silly.
up.
Oh, the radio is too big. Haha,
Right.
right.
But you always got to remember in the back of your head, oh, I got to get my life kit for that 72 hours when the Russian, like, that's the message that you're going to have in the back of your head.
Well, and the point that I'm making is that life kit, what is it going to do? Is it going to save freaking your country? Is it actually going to save you and your family? No, it's not, right? It's not going to do shit. Let's say, for example, you survive 72 hours, in the nuclear holocaust. Well, you know what? That's 72 hours. You suffered longer than the rest of us. Let me tell you what. So,
right.
So it's like, what is it going to do? What it's going to do is what we've been doing all along, right? It's going to motivate and scare the population into giving that sense that threat is real. We are under danger. You got to remember to have your survival pack. Why would you not need a survival pack? Like, why wouldn't you need a survival pack? Obviously, don't you understand the danger? I mean, here we are trying to protect you. By the way, you should help us do that. But you should at least be taking the time to protect yourself. I mean, this is just a casual, friendly reminder. It's even a little bit playful, like, she's being a little bit silly, maybe to quell the anxiety of what she's saying or implying.
So, if you're European watching that, I think it's time for a revolution, right? You guys need to start organizing yourselves, and you need to start kicking people like her out of power and bowling them down the street. Because if you don't, you're not going to survive, and you're going to see your standards of living drop exponentially in the coming decades. So Europe, you got to start taking people like her seriously, because she's what's killing your continent right now.
It always reminds me of think about how in a lot of horror movies, the scary, bad evildoer is a clown,
Yeah.
It's like an apt metaphor where it's like, ha, 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 almost like clownish music in the background. He's saying, prepare your children for war. Get ready to die, bitch. Like, that's what he's saying. And that is a scary clown. That right there is it, or whatever other apt metaphor. You know what I mean?
Yep, know what you mean. But terrifying that the Europeans are even wasting money and time and effort on things like that. But I guess that's where we are. So.
Yeah, also, just one last point on that. It makes me think about how India's been saying this. Everybody's been saying this in Europe. Like, our approach to war was definitely wrong. We can see that from the Ukraine war. And one thing that we don't have is deep reserves. So maybe this is a way of casually building it up. It's optimistic. They're getting ready for a war, man.
Well, they're trying. I mean, the thing about the EU, like, and I think she's probably some EU trother too, right? The EU, they are pushing all the member states with stuff like this. And they're pushing everybody. You need to start conscription. You got to get ready for war. That's the message. The problem is all these nation states are looking at it and saying, really? Nah, we're good. Like, I don't see a whole lot of people within any of these states supportive of the EU. And like I said, it's just a matter of time before the EU crumbles. right? It'll be in my lifetime for sure.
Well, now it's yeah. Okay, we could talk more, but we should probably wrap it up. We're at our time, so
All right,
I
folks.
guess
Cheers.
everybody, that was awesome. Yes, nice to chat with you, Nanya.
Yeah.
I would miss the last 2 open mics. Hopefully, I'll be there for the next one. I listened in, but I wasn't there. But okay, I guess we'll chat with you guys next week. Peace.
Cheers.